The first time I noticed my neighbor was the night she knocked on my door at 11:47 p.m., wearing an oversized shirt, barefoot in the hallway, looking straight into my eyes, like she had already decided something about me. "Hey, sorry to bother you this late," she said quietly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "My kitchen light stopped working. Could you maybe help me for a minute?" It should have been a normal request, a neighbor asking for help. But there was something strange about the way she looked at me. Not awkward, not shy, just certain. Like she already knew I would say yes. And the truth is, that night, I had no idea that the girl standing in front of me wasn't just my neighbor. She had been watching me for years. Before the story starts, do two things quickly. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like so you don't miss the next part of this story. And write in the comments where you're watching from. I always read them. My name is Ethan. I'm 26 years old, and until a few months ago, my life was painfully ordinary. I worked remote for a small design company, which meant most of my days looked exactly the same. Wake up, coffee, laptop, emails, work, gym, dinner, sleep. Repeat. The apartment building where I lived was quiet, almost too quiet. Most of the neighbors were older couples or people who kept to themselves. You could live there for years and never know the person next door. That was exactly how it was, until Olivia moved in. I remember the first time I saw her. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was coming back from the grocery store, struggling with two heavy bags, when the elevator doors opened and she stepped inside. Tall, dark hair falling over one shoulder, simple jeans and a light sweater, but somehow she looked like she belonged in a movie scene rather than a dusty apartment building. She looked at the grocery bags in my hands and smiled. "Need help with those?" she asked. Her voice was calm, confident. I shook my head. "I've got it." She nodded slowly, like she expected that answer. "New here?" I asked after a moment. "Yeah," she said. "Just moved into 4B. My apartment was 4A. I remember thinking that was convenient. The elevator reached our floor. We stepped out together, and that's when she looked at my door, then at hers, and laughed quietly. "Well," she said, holding up her keys, "looks like we're neighbors." Something about the way she said it sounded almost intentional, but I didn't think much about it at the time. Over the next few days, I started seeing Olivia more often. Too often, actually. Monday morning, I opened my door to take out the trash, and she was already standing in the hallway, tying her shoes. "Morning, Ethan," she said casually. I paused. "I don't remember telling you my name." She smiled. "You introduced yourself in the elevator," she replied. Maybe I had. I couldn't remember. Wednesday evening, I came back from the gym and found her sitting on the stairs near our floor, scrolling through her phone. She looked up the moment I walked in. "Hey," she said, "how was the workout?" Again, the question felt strangely natural, like we had known each other longer than a few days. "Good," I answered. "You?" "I just got back from a run." That explained the loose, athletic jacket she was wearing. Her hair was slightly messy, and a few strands stuck to her cheek. She looked good. Really good. I caught myself staring and quickly looked away. She noticed. A small smile appeared on her lips. "You're very easy to read, Ethan." I laughed awkwardly. "What does that mean?" "Nothing," she said, standing up. "Just an observation." Then she walked past me toward her apartment. But as she reached her door, she stopped, turned back, and looked at me again. "By the way," she added softly, "you should lock your door better at night." My stomach tightened slightly. What? She tilted her head. Yesterday evening it wasn't fully closed. I noticed when I walked by. I frowned. I'm pretty sure I closed it. Maybe, she said with a small shrug. Then she disappeared into her apartment. The next few weeks continued like that. Little interactions, small conversations in the hallway, random moments that somehow always included Olivia. One night, I came home late from meeting a friend. As I reached my door, I noticed a small box sitting on the floor. No note, no label. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were chocolate chip cookies, still warm. At that exact moment, Olivia's door opened. She leaned against the frame and watched my reaction. I was testing a recipe, she said casually. You baked these for me? She shrugged. You looked like someone who appreciates cookies. I laughed. That's a very specific observation. Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. Oh, she said quietly. I've been observing you for a while. For a moment, I wasn't sure I heard her correctly. I've been observing you for a while. She said it so casually that it almost sounded like a joke. But there was something about the way she held my gaze that made the words sit strangely in my mind. I chuckled lightly, trying to keep the moment normal. Well, that sounds a little suspicious. Olivia tilted her head slightly and smiled. Does it? I lifted the box of cookies. I mean, if the observing leads to cookies, I guess I'm not complaining. She laughed softly. That's a fair point. For a few seconds, we just stood there in the quiet hallway. The building was always silent at night, and somehow that made every small interaction feel louder. So, I said finally, do you bake often? Sometimes, she replied. Mostly when I'm bored. And tonight you were bored? Very. There was a brief pause. She watched me take another cookie from the box. Good? She asked. Yeah, I admitted. Really good, actually. Good, she said again, almost to herself. Then she pushed off the door frame and stepped a little closer into the hallway. Just don't get used to it. Too late, I said. Now I'll expect cookies every week. She gave me a look that was half amused, half thoughtful. Careful what you expect from your neighbors, Ethan. Before I could answer, she stepped back into her apartment. Good night. The door closed softly. I stood there for another moment, holding the box of cookies. Something about that conversation stayed in my head longer than it should have. Not because it was strange, but because it felt like Olivia was always slightly ahead of the moment. Like she knew exactly how every interaction would play out. Still, I brushed it off. People have different personalities. Some are just more confident. Over the next week, we started talking more often. Not long conversations, just short moments that somehow kept happening. Tuesday morning, she knocked on my door again. This time, she was holding a screwdriver. Emergency, she announced when I opened the door. I blinked. What happened? My cabinet door in the kitchen is about to fall off, she said. And you look like someone who knows how to fix things. That's a bold assumption. She smiled. Am I wrong? I sighed dramatically. Probably not. Her apartment looked almost identical to mine in layout, but somehow it felt different. Warmer. Softer lighting. Plants on the windowsill. A faint scent of vanilla in the air. She stepped aside to let me in. The cabinet door was hanging slightly crooked. Yeah, I said, examining the hinge. That's an easy fix. Good, she replied, leaning against the counter. While I tightened the screws, I could feel her watching me. Not in a weird way, just focused. "You do this often?" she asked. "What, fix cabinets?" "Help people." I shrugged. "If someone asks." She crossed her arms and studied me. "You're a nice guy, Ethan." I glanced back at her. That sounded like a diagnosis. "It kind of is." "Is that a bad thing?" She thought about it for a second. "Not bad," she said slowly. "Just rare." When I finished, I opened and closed the cabinet door a few times. "Good as new." She stepped closer to test it herself. For a second, we were standing very close in the small kitchen. Too close. I stepped back slightly. She noticed. Again, that small smile appeared. "You're nervous around me," she said quietly. "I'm not nervous." "You just stepped back." "Because you were about to hit the cabinet." "That's not true." I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. She was clearly enjoying the moment. "You do this on purpose, don't you?" I asked. "What?" "Mess with people." Olivia laughed. "Only with people I like." That answer caught me off guard. Before I could respond, she grabbed 2 glasses from the cabinet and filled them with water. She handed me one. "Payment for the repair." I raised the glass. "That's very generous." "You're welcome." We stood there drinking water in the quiet kitchen. Then she suddenly asked something that made the moment shift. "Do you ever feel like life is too predictable?" I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Like every day is the same," she said. "Wake up, work, sleep, repeat." "That's basically my life," I admitted. "I know." The words came out instantly. Too instantly. I looked at her. "You know?" She paused for half a second. Then she shrugged. "You told me you work from home." "Yeah, but I didn't tell you my schedule." Her expression softened. "I'm good at noticing patterns." Something about the way she said it made the room feel slightly quieter. Then she changed the subject immediately. "Anyway," she said, walking toward the door, "thanks for saving my cabinet." I followed her into the hallway. "Any time." As I reached my own apartment door, she spoke again. "Ethan." I turned. She was still standing in her doorway. For a moment, she looked like she was deciding whether to say something. Then she asked quietly, "Can I ask you something a little weird?" "Sure." Her eyes held mine. "Have you ever wondered if someone close to you might feel something that you completely missed?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She held my gaze for another second. Then she smiled again. "Never mind," she said lightly. "Just a random thought." And she closed the door. For the rest of that evening, her question stayed in my head longer than I expected. Have you ever wondered if someone close to you might feel something that you completely missed? At first, I assumed it was just one of those random philosophical questions people ask when conversations run out of steam. But the way Olivia had looked at me when she said it didn't feel random. It felt deliberate. Still, life moved on. The next morning, I tried to focus on work, but around noon, I realized I had been rereading the same email 3 times without actually processing it. My mind kept drifting back to the hallway conversations, the cookies, the cabinet repair, the way Olivia watched me when we talked. There was something about her that was difficult to ignore. At around 2 in the afternoon, I finally took a break and went downstairs to grab coffee from the small cafe across the street. When I came back 20 minutes later, I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the 4th floor, and just before the doors closed, a hand slipped between them. The doors opened again. Olivia stepped inside. She was wearing black leggings and a loose gray hoodie, her hair tied into a messy ponytail like she had just come back from a run. She looked at me and smiled immediately. "Hey, neighbor." I raised an eyebrow. "You appear at very convenient moments." "Convenient for who?" she asked. "For you," I said. "You always seem prepared for conversation." She leaned against the elevator wall. "Maybe I just enjoy running into you." The elevator started moving upward. "I'm starting to think you run into me on purpose," I said. Olivia didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied my face carefully, like she was considering whether to tell me something. Then she said, "Would it bother you if I did?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I admitted. "Honest answer," she said approvingly. "Was there another option?" "Most people pretend to be confident," she replied. The elevator reached the 4th floor. The doors opened. We stepped out together into the hallway. I expected her to head straight for her apartment, but instead she walked slowly beside me. "Ethan," she said suddenly. "Yeah? Do you remember the first time we met? In the elevator with my groceries?" She nodded. "Exactly." "You offered to help." "I did." I unlocked my apartment door but stayed standing in the hallway. "What about it?" I asked. She leaned lightly against the wall. "Nothing," she said. "I was just wondering if you noticed anything strange about that moment." I thought back for a second. "No?" Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "That's interesting." "What is?" "You noticed details about everything else," she said, "but not that." "Not what?" She pushed off the wall. "Forget it. You can't just say that and walk away." She laughed quietly. "I can if I want to." Before she could retreat into her apartment, I stopped her. "Olivia." She turned. "What?" "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Speaking in puzzles." "I'm not speaking in puzzles." "You absolutely are." She crossed her arms. "Maybe I'm just curious how long it takes you to notice things." "Notice what?" Her eyes softened slightly. "Important things." For a moment, the hallway felt very quiet again. I searched her expression, trying to figure out what she meant. "You know," I said slowly, "most neighbors don't interrogate each other like this." "Maybe I'm not most neighbors." "That much is obvious." She smiled again. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped a little closer. Close enough that I could see the faint freckles across the bridge of her nose. "You're very observant about small things," she said quietly. "But somehow you miss the obvious ones." "I don't know what that means." "I know." Her voice had dropped slightly, almost playful, but there was something deeper under it. Then suddenly her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen. "Damn!" "What?" "I have to go." "Go where?" "Out." That was very informative. She laughed again. "Don't worry, Ethan." She stepped back toward her apartment. "You'll figure things out eventually." "Figure what out?" She opened her door. Before stepping inside, she looked at me one more time. The same look she always gave me, like she was waiting for something. Then she said quietly, "You're closer than you think," and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds after her door closed. "You're closer than you think." Closer to what? The more I thought about it, the more the conversation started to feel like a puzzle I didn't have all the pieces for. Eventually, I shook my head, went inside my apartment, and tried to forget about it. But over the next few days, something strange started happening. I began noticing Olivia everywhere. Not in a creepy way, just consistently. Monday evening, I came back from the gym and she was already in the hallway watering the small plant that sat on the window ledge between our doors. Tuesday morning, I opened my door to grab a package and she stepped out of her apartment at the exact same moment. "Morning," she said casually. Wednesday afternoon, I went downstairs to pick up food delivery and she was coming back into the building with a grocery bag. Each time she greeted me the same way. Relaxed, natural, like all of it was perfectly normal. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. After all, we lived on the same floor. People cross paths. But by Thursday night, I started to notice something else. Olivia always seemed prepared. Prepared to talk. Prepared with a comment. Prepared with a question. That night, I was unlocking my apartment when her door opened again. She leaned against the frame. "Long day?" she asked. I glanced over. "How did you know?" "You're walking slower than usual." I looked down at my feet. "You analyze people a lot, don't you?" "Only the interesting ones." "And I'm interesting?" She smiled slightly. "You'd be surprised." I stepped inside my apartment, then paused and turned back. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "You always seem to appear right when I get home." She didn't look offended. If anything, she looked amused. "That bothers you?" "It confuses me." "Why?" "Because it feels like you're expecting me." She tilted her head. "Maybe I am." The answer came out so calmly that I couldn't immediately respond. "You just wait in the hallway?" I asked. "Sometimes." "For what reason?" Her eyes met mine again. "To see you." The hallway went quiet. There was no hesitation in her voice, no embarrassment. She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I laughed awkwardly. "Well, that's flattering, I guess." "You guess?" "I mean, it's not something people usually admit." Olivia shrugged. "I don't see the point in pretending." I leaned against my door frame, studying her. "You're very direct." "Only when I feel like it." "And when do you not feel like it?" She thought for a moment. "When I want someone else to figure something out first." That sentence again felt like it carried more meaning than it should. "What exactly am I supposed to figure out?" I asked. She looked at me carefully. Then she asked something unexpected. "Ethan, can I ask you a serious question?" "Sure." "When you meet someone new, how long does it usually take you to notice if they like you?" I blinked. "That's random." "Answer it." "I don't know," I said honestly. "Sometimes it's obvious." "And sometimes?" "Sometimes you can't tell." Olivia nodded slowly. "Interesting. Why?" She looked away for a moment, toward the window at the end of the hallway. Then she looked back at me. "What if someone liked you for a long time," she said quietly, "but you didn't notice?" My chest tightened slightly. "That sounds very specific." "Maybe it is." I studied her face. "Are we talking about someone in particular?" For the first time since I met her, Olivia hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled again. "You really don't see it, do you?" "See what?" She exhaled softly. "Never mind." Before I could stop her, she stepped back toward her door again. "Olivia," I said. She paused. "What?" "Why do I feel like you keep trying to tell me something?" She watched me for a long moment. Then she answered quietly. "Because I am." My heartbeat picked up slightly. "Then just say it." For a second it looked like she might. Her lips parted slightly. But then she shook her head. "No," she said, "not yet." "Why not?" Her expression softened again. "Because," she said gently, "I want to see how long it takes you to realize it on your own." The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the conversation from the night before. Because I am. I want to see how long it takes you to realize it on your own. I kept trying to interpret what Olivia meant, but every possibility I considered sounded either ridiculous or too obvious. By noon, I forced myself to stop thinking about it and focus on work. Around 3 in the afternoon, I finally finished a long meeting and decided to step outside for some air. I grabbed my jacket, opened my apartment door, and nearly walked straight into Olivia. She was standing in the hallway, right in front of my door, holding 2 paper coffee cups. We both froze for half a second. "Oh," she said. "Oh," I repeated. She looked down at the coffee cups, then back at me. "Well, this timing worked out." I folded my arms. "Let me guess. Coincidence?" She smiled slowly. "Maybe. You were standing outside my door. I was about to knock. With coffee." "Yes." "For me?" She lifted 1 cup slightly. "Unless you think I drink 2 at the same time." I took the cup from her. "Thanks." "It's the same one you always order," she said. I frowned. "Wait, how do you know what I always order?" She paused, then shrugged lightly. "You walked past the cafe with it 3 mornings in a row." "That's impressive memory." "I told you," she said, leaning against the wall again. "I notice patterns." I took a sip. She was right. It was exactly the coffee I usually bought. "You didn't answer my question," I said. "Which one?" "Why were you about to knock?" She thought about it for a moment. "Because I wanted to see you." "You say that very casually." "Should I say it dramatically?" "I'm just not used to people admitting that." She studied me again. "You're not used to a lot of things, Ethan." "Such as?" "Such as someone being obvious." "I thought you said you weren't being obvious." She laughed quietly. "Fair point." We stood there drinking coffee in the hallway again. Then something else occurred to me. "Wait," I said. "What?" "You knew exactly when I'd open the door." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "What makes you think that?" "You were standing right here." "I could have just been lucky." "Or," I continued, "you knew my schedule." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the coffee cup in her hands. Then she said softly, "You're predictable." "That sounds insulting." "It's not." "It kind of is." "It just means you have habits." "Everyone has habits." "Exactly." "So you've been studying mine?" She looked up again. "Yes." The answer was calm, direct, and somehow not uncomfortable, just honest. I shook my head slightly. "You're a very unusual neighbor." "I've been told that before." "Do you do this with everyone?" "No." "Just me?" "Yes." Again, the answer came instantly. Something about that made the hallway feel smaller. "Why?" I asked. Olivia took a slow sip of her coffee. Then she looked at me the same way she had the first night she knocked on my door. Focused. Certain. "Because you're the only person here I care about noticing me." The sentence landed heavier than anything she had said before. I stared at her. "You say things like that, and then expect me to just guess what you mean." She smiled faintly. "I'm giving you clues." "Clues to what?" Her eyes searched my face for a moment. Then she asked quietly, "Ethan, do you really think I moved into the apartment across from you by accident?" My stomach tightened slightly. "What?" She held my gaze. "Think about it." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because for the first time since I met her, the thought actually crossed my mind. What if it wasn't a coincidence? Olivia watched the realization slowly forming on my face. Then she finished her coffee, placed the empty cup on the window ledge, and stepped back toward her door. Before going inside, she said one more thing. "Now you're starting to ask the right questions." That night, I couldn't focus on anything. The words Olivia had said kept repeating in my head. "Do you really think I moved into the apartment across from you by accident?" The more I thought about it, the stranger the situation started to feel. When she first moved in, everything seemed normal. Two neighbors meeting in an elevator, casual conversations in the hallway. But when I replayed every interaction in my mind, a pattern started forming. She knew my name immediately. She knew my coffee order. She seemed to know my schedule. And she always appeared at the exact moment I stepped out of my apartment. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but the doubt stayed. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual again. This time with a clear plan. I needed to talk to her directly. No puzzles, no clues, just answers. Around 10 in the morning, I stepped into the hallway and knocked on Olivia's door. For a few seconds, there was no sound. Then the door opened. She was wearing loose black shorts and a white t-shirt, her hair still slightly messy, like she had just woken up. But when she saw me standing there, she didn't look surprised. She smiled. I was wondering how long it would take. That sentence immediately made my suspicion worse. "You were expecting me?" I asked. "Eventually." "How?" She stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I walked inside. Her apartment smelled faintly like coffee and something sweet, probably the same vanilla scent I noticed before. She walked into the kitchen and poured herself water. "You look serious today," she said. "I am." She leaned against the counter. "All right." I crossed my arms. "Let's stop with the clues." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh? You keep saying things that sound like half confessions," I continued. "But then you stop right before explaining anything." She didn't interrupt. She just listened. "So I'm going to ask you directly," I said. "Okay." "Did you move into this apartment because of me?" The question hung in the air. For a moment, Olivia didn't answer. She simply looked at me. Not surprised, not nervous, just thoughtful. Then she nodded once. "Yes." My chest tightened. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You moved into the apartment across from me. Intentionally?" "Yes." The room felt suddenly quieter. "Why?" I asked. Olivia exhaled slowly. Then she walked over to the small table near the window and sat down. She motioned for me to sit across from her. I did. For the first time since I met her, she looked slightly nervous. Not scared, just careful with her words. "Before I answer that," she said softly, "I want to ask you something." "What?" "Do you remember the park 2 blocks from here?" I frowned slightly. "The one with the basketball court?" "Yes." "Sure." You used to go there in the evenings, she said. My stomach tightened. How do you know that? You'd sit on the bench near the fence, she continued, ignoring my question. Usually around sunset. My pulse started rising. Olivia? You'd stay there for about 20 minutes, she went on quietly. Sometimes longer. I leaned forward slightly. How do you know that? Finally, she looked directly into my eyes. Because I saw you there. When? Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Years ago. My mind froze. What? She nodded slowly. I didn't live in this building back then, she said, but my friend did. The room suddenly felt smaller. I used to visit her, Olivia continued, and every time I walked past that park, you were there. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. You noticed me years ago? Yes. How many years? 3. The number hit me harder than I expected. 3 years? She nodded again. For 3 years you knew who I was, and I had no idea you existed. Olivia looked down at the table for a second, then back at me. That's not entirely true. What do you mean? Her eyes softened slightly. You noticed me once. When? Her lips curved into a faint smile. But you didn't remember. I stared at her, trying to remember. You're saying we met before? Olivia nodded slowly. Not really met, she said. More like crossed paths. When? She leaned back slightly in the chair, thinking. It was late afternoon, early autumn. The park was almost empty. Her eyes moved slightly, like she was replaying the memory. You were sitting on the same bench you always used, she continued, looking at your phone. I was walking past with my friend. I tried to picture it, but nothing came up. There were a lot of people in that park, I said. I probably saw hundreds of faces. I know, she replied calmly. That's why you didn't remember. She looked down at the table again for a second, then continued. My friend stopped to tie her shoe near the fence. I was standing there, waiting for her, and you looked up. I stayed silent, letting her finish. You looked at me for maybe 2 seconds, Olivia said. That was it. And you smiled. I blinked. That's all? That's all, she said. That's the moment you noticed me. Yes. That seems small. Olivia shrugged lightly. Maybe. But for some reason, she continued quietly, I kept thinking about it after. I leaned back in my chair. You're telling me a random smile in a park 3 years ago made you remember me? It wasn't just that, she said. What else? You came back to that bench almost every evening. So you started watching me? She didn't flinch at the word. Yes. For how long? A few months. I ran a hand through my hair. And you never talked to me? No. Why? She hesitated slightly. You always looked busy in your own thoughts. That doesn't sound like a reason. It felt like interrupting something. I shook my head slowly. So what happened after those months? My friend moved away, Olivia said. She left the apartment in this building. And you stopped coming here? Yes. So how did we end up neighbors? Her expression softened again. About 6 months ago, I came back to visit another friend who lives nearby. And? I walked past the park again, My chest tightened slightly. "You were there," she said. "Same bench." I let out a quiet breath. "That's a strange coincidence." Olivia tilted her head. "I don't believe in coincidences." "So what did you do?" "I kept walking." "That's it?" "For a few days." I frowned. "What changed?" She looked directly at me again. "One evening, I saw you leaving the park." "And?" "You walked into this building." I blinked. "You followed me?" "No," she said calmly. "I recognized the entrance from when my friend lived here." "And then you realized I lived here?" "Yes." "And that's when you decided to move in?" She nodded once. "That sounds insane when you say it out loud," I said. "Probably. But you did it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" For the first time since this conversation started, Olivia took a deeper breath before answering. Then she said quietly, "Because I liked you." I stared at her. "You liked someone you had never spoken to?" "I had seen enough." "Seen what?" Her voice softened again. "You always helped people in that park," she said. "What do you mean?" "There was an older man who dropped his groceries once. You picked everything up for him." I tried to remember. "You also gave your seat to a woman with a child on the bus stop nearby." My brow tightened. "You noticed that?" "I noticed everything." The room fell quiet again. Then she added softly, "And every time you smiled at someone, it looked real." I didn't know what to say to that. "So you moved into the apartment across from me," I said slowly. "Yes." "And then what?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Then I started waiting for you to notice me."